everybody. This is the official YouTube video for the 2018 releases for the Pennsylvania Keystone Algebra 1 exam. This is going to be the 12 multiple choice questions as it pertains to Module 1. So this is the Module 1 sample items that they released in 2018, I guess leading up to the the 2018-2019 school year. Testing windows. Anyway, I'll stop blabbering about that and let's get down to it, okay? Question 1. 4 values are listed below. Which list shows the values in order from least to greatest? The strategy here, and I'll just try to say this one time quick. Before looking over this video, I'm going to assume that you've already attempted these questions, and you're looking at this video because you're really stuck, like you've tried your best and you're stuck, or you're just looking for the answer key. You're just making sure that you're correct, right? Whatever, you got an answer and you're just making sure that what you got is correct, and the method you used was valid, okay? So the strategy that I'm going to recommend here is convert them all to decimals. Because you're trying to put them all from small to big and compare them, and the easiest form to compare values is in decimal form. So this is literally 1 divided by 7, and so that's the approximate decimal. 20% as a decimal is 0.2. You would move the decimal place 2 places to the left from here to here, or just use a conversion function on a lot of calculators. You can just do a quick conversion. It's kind of built in, right? You could do a square root on your calculator, and as long as you're not in some special mode, it'll give you a decimal approximation of about that. And then this means absolute value of negative 0.5. Remember, absolute value is distance from 0 on a number line, or just making something positive if it's not already positive, and so that just makes negative 0.5 into positive 0.5. And so once you have these in order, 0.5, about 0.7, 0.2, about 0.1, so the least, this is about the least, because 0.1, it's about 0.1, and then this, and then this guy, and then this guy. So it's pretty much already in order already, except these two need to be switched. So is it C? I'm going to go with yes. So changing everything to decimals makes it easier to put them in order chronologically or whatnot. Now remember, they could have wanted you to do it greatest to least. Just make sure you read directions very carefully. Moving on, number 2. They give you this inequality, as it says that all this is greater than this. Know your symbols, please, for goodness sake. This is a greater than symbol. The alligator mouth is open towards the bigger thing. Which values of A and B make the inequality true? Okay, well, which one of these combination of values for A and B will actually make this true, will actually make this greater than all of this. And I see the only strategy here is to try out each choice. It's a very common strategy. Now look, sometimes that is literally the only thing you can possibly do. You know, the question is set up that way. The only thing you can possibly do is just check each choice. Sometimes you don't have to do that, but you still could as like a backup plan or something you might actually prefer to do as like your plan A. So again, it's surprising how many questions with that are multiple choice you can just check each answer out. You know, that's the beauty of multiple choice. But here it's pretty much your only option. And so here's what this looks like as well, let's see if this is the correct choice. If I plug in 1 for A and 1 for B, this is what I get. And then from here, I think maybe the only other thing I'm going to need to point out in this question is order of operations. When you are crunching these numbers, just please make sure you're following the order of operations. You know, the whole please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or however you know it as, you know, PEMDAS, or I don't know, coming from Fort LaBeouf Middle School, there's almost like a more comprehensive version of it, of PEMDAS, like GREMDAS or something. I don't know. That's not it, but just make sure you're following the order of operations, okay? So here you would be multiplying in here first. Here you'd be raising this to the third power. And then you'd be raising 1 to the third power first, then multiplying by 4. Anyway, when you try these values for A and B, you end up with 4 is greater than 15, which is not true. Going out of order here, I guess, to choice C next. Plugging in 2 for A and 0 for B, you would first multiply, then raise to the exponent, then multiply, and over here you could do exponent and then multiplying, and again, something that is not true. Remember, things in parentheses trump exponents, so you would do the whatever's in parentheses, then the exponent. Option B, using 1 for A and 2 for B. Look over this math when you get a chance. Getting to here, or using 2 in there for A and 1 in for B. It turns out that it is these values that make this inequality true. Number 3. This one is sort of scary looking at first glance, but please. An equation involving polynomials is shown below. ax plus 5y plus ax minus y minus this quantity 3x minus by equals 2x plus y. What are the values of A and B? So what would A have to be and B have to be for all of this to just equal 2x plus y? Well, for some reason right now I feel like talking about the secondary strategy first. I don't know. Because it might just be your first, plan. Like it might be your plan A. So again, what we're doing is, what would be the proper values for A and B that would actually make this all equal this? Well, down here I have like a secondary plan, like to all this. Okay, we'll get to all this in a second. But something that you could do is just try out each pair of values. Try plugging in 4 for A, negative 3 for B, and see if it works out. You know, what would that make it? 4x plus 5y plus 1x minus 1y minus this 3x minus negative 3y. I mean, you could throw these numbers in for A and B and see if it checks out. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, you could try these numbers for A and B, and then try these, and then try these. Or you could just try to simplify and just work with this left side as is. And so here's what that's going to look like. First, clear the parentheses, okay? Like these parentheses aren't really needed. There's nothing really to distribute. Here you could really just distribute the plus sign, or what is really technically a positive 1. Ultimately, you know, these parentheses aren't going to matter, so you can just drop the parentheses. Here, we're going to kind of need to distribute the negative sign, which is technically a negative 1. And so clearing these parentheses results in a minus 3x plus by, okay? So clearing the parentheses gets me to here. Next, what I would do is I'd want to combine like terms, right? So I want you to notice that there's x terms and there's y terms. So I just put the, you don't need to write this step down. This is all for sort of just explanations purposes, but I put all the x terms in blue and all the y terms that could combine together in red. And so, you know, this is like 1x and this is negative 3x. I could combine those together, but ax, I mean, how about we just sort of put those together and think, okay, here's all of the x terms that would combine. Here's all the y terms that would combine. And I hope by now you know what I'm doing here, what my strategy is, because, again, all of this is supposed to just equal this side, the 2x plus y. So all of this needs to combine together to equal what? All the x terms are supposed to combine together to equal the 2x over here, and all of these y terms are supposed to combine together to equal the plus y, the plus 1y, if you want to think of it like that. And so now I think it's not that big of a leap to think about what would A have to be so that ax plus 1x minus 3x would equal 2x. Okay? And so what would that have to be? You know, what plus 1 minus 3 would equal 2? What do you think? Well, 1 minus 3 is like negative 2. So wouldn't A have to be 4? So 4x plus 1x is 5x minus 3x. Okay, so we could pretty much cancel out C and D, right? Because A has to be 4. And so over here, 5y minus 1y, that's 4y so far. So 4y plus by has to equal 1y. Well, wouldn't that be negative 3? So it turns out that it is A. A would have to equal 4 and B would have to equal negative 3. Okay? So there's some good news if you were going with like this other strategy of just trying each choice out. If you start with the first choice, A, you luckily strike gold right away. Even though you really should just make sure by checking all the other ones, even if you try out choice A and it looks pretty good, or it checks out pretty good, you do want to be sure, but still. Number 4, the directions say simplify this. Okay, simplify this crazy looking fraction. And please don't be confused by this. If you're taking Algebra 2 with me, or whatever, whoever, this actually shouldn't confuse you too bad, but this isn't worth worrying about. All this is there for is because x is not allowed to equal -2 or -1, because that would end up with you dividing by 0, basically. So it's kind of like fine print that just sort of has to be there because of the whole you're not allowed to divide by 0 rule. But ultimately, this stuff doesn't mean anything in actually solving this question. So here's what you do. If you want to simplify this fraction, okay, you can only cancel factors. Can only cancel factors. So you should not do any canceling whatsoever, no simplifying, until you've tried to factor the numerator and factor the denominator. Okay? Please, 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 please pay attention to that. I'm going to say that again because this is a very, very, very common mistake that people make. They do not remember to factor before canceling things out. Because guess what? As this is written right now, there's no canceling you can do. There's no canceling. So we're going to have to factor. So how do we factor the numerator? Well, also please remember that there is a certain method of factoring you should always try first, which is the GCF. GCF of the numerator is 3. And when you factor that out, you're left with that. And then how about the denominator? Is there a GCF with the denominator? Actually, yes. And it's 6. And when you factor out a 6, you're left with that. Well, when it comes to factoring, sometimes you can do a GCF and then keep factoring by unfoil. You can factor again. And so does x squared plus x minus 2 unfoil? Why, yes, it does. Why, yes, it does. Because there's two numbers that multiply to make -2, but they also add or combine up to be +1. And how about the denominator? Does this factor again by unfoil? Yes, it does. And so now that it's been completely factored, so we have a factor of 3, a factor of x plus 2, a factor of x minus 1 up in the numerator, and in the denominator we have a factor of 6 and a factor of x plus 2 and a factor of x plus 1. Now, is there things that can cancel? Are there factors that cancel? Why, yes, there is. The x plus 2 and the x plus 2, those cancel completely away, like they divide completely out. And then 3 divided by 6, that reduces to like 1 over 2. And so after the canceling and the simplifying, you're left with this, which is, looks like choice C. Because really, do we really need this 1 right here? No. And so the top is really just x minus 1, and the bottom is, so there we go. Again, you factor before you look to cancel. Number 5. Joan has a gym gift card worth $100. Each time she visits the gym, $12 is deducted from the amount remaining on the gift card. Which equation can be used to determine the amount of money M in dollars remaining on the gift card after Joan visits the gym D times? Okay. just like I've said on many other videos, the Keystones very much like to give you questions where it's very, very, very important. There's a lot of emphasis on what each variable represents. So hence the underlying here in blue and red, that M is for the amount of money and D is for the number of visits to the gym. And so starting with $100 and $12 is deducted every time we visit. Now you just have to simply pick the equation that models the mathematics going on here and the entire situation, the entire scenario. So do you think it's A? Again, maybe we could just check each one, right? Do you think this equation tells the story correctly? That the amount of money remaining will equal 12 minus 100 multiplied to the number of times. So is that what we do? We multiply 100 to the number of times we visited and subtract that from 12. No, that doesn't sound right. So basically, like, at the end of the day, you just have to be able to understand, I don't know, just basic math and how it relates to situations like this, right? Do you think we do 12 times the number of visits and then minus 100 from that? Does that make sense? So if we visited the gym twice, it would be 12 times 2 to be 24, and then do 24 minus 100, and that's going to be the amount. No, that's going to be negative money. But I think we're getting close. Like, doesn't it make sense to multiply 12 to the number of visits, because $12 is deducted every time, like for every visit. For every visit, $12 is deducted. So it does make sense to sort of multiply 12 or maybe negative 12 because it's being deducted. So let's see if choice D makes sense. Okay, let's just double check. So we do negative 12 times the number of visits, and then we add 100. In other words, we do 100, like we have $100 to begin with, and then we subtract 12 every time we do a visit. So it's almost like we multiply negative 12 times the number of visits, and then combine that, or, well, let me start over again with that. So we multiply 12 to the number of times we visited, and then we subtract that from 100. D. Number 6. The equation below describes the relationship between, again, very, very important, a lot of emphasis on a lot of equations, that X is number of months. You're pretty much dead in the water if you don't pay attention to what the X variable is all about and what the Y variable is all about. So number of months is X, total amount of money is Y, and customer began renting a storage unit. So here's the equation. Which statement describes a solution of the equation based on the number of months the customer has rented the storage unit? Solution, okay? Remember, a solution to an equation like this is going to be a pair of numbers. One number that plugs in for X, one number that plugs in for Y, and together they make this equation true. And I think this is one of those types of problems where the strategy is you pretty much have no choice but to just try each choice out. Just check each one. So after exactly 16 months, so months was X. Okay, so this means X equals 16, and this means Y equals 240. So when you throw these values into the equation, you get this. So is this true? Trying out choice B, where 16 is y and 240 is x, is this true? And then the values for choice C, and then choice D, not really room here on my screen. So spoiler alert, it's not D. It's going to be A, B, or C. Which one of these is true? Does 240 equal 15 times 16 plus 30? I don't think it does. Or does it? I don't think so. Do you think when you do 15 times 240 and then add 30 it equals 16? Not even close. 15 times 16 plus 30, does that equal 270? I think it does. So that's why it's C, because this pair of values, 16 in there for x, 270 in there for y, made it true. Those numbers fit. All right, now that's halfway, half of them done. 6 down, 6 to go. Number 7. Charlene owns a bookstore. Good for Charlene. She purchases used books from customers. Good for Charlene. She pays $3.50 for each hardback book. Good for Charlene. She pays 75 cents for each paperback book. Good for Charlene. Charlene pays a customer a total of $199.05 for 149 used books. Okay, all right. Good for you, Charlene. Which system of equations? Gosh, again. X has been clearly defined. Please know that X is the number of hardback books. Please know that the Y variable is for the number of paperback books. Charlene, okay, so which system fits all this info? So X is the number of hardback books. Y is the number of paperback books. Well, 149 total books. So I am not liking this at all. Because if you do X plus Y, remember X is the number of hardbacks, Y is the number of paperback books. If you added all the books together, you don't get $199.75. This is an amount of money. So I like X plus Y equals 149. Because 149 is a number of books. Okay? Now, where you get this total amount of money from is $3.50 multiplied to the number of hardback books. Like, that's how you get total money for the hardback books. You take X, okay, the unknown number of hardback books, and you must multiply that with $3.50 because it's $3.50 each book. Same thing with 75 cents and the Y. You know, it's 75 cents for every one. And so it makes sense to multiply 0.75 with Y. Y being the number, the unknown number, granted, but the number of paperback books. And so now we want to multiply 0.75 with Y. So it looks like it's going to be choice D, which has the correct equations. Number 8. Gloria is considering 2 different movie services. Good for you, Gloria. And then it says how service A charges $15 monthly fee, a $15 monthly fee for unlimited streaming of movies and $2.50 per DVD. Service B charges a $12 monthly fee for unlimited streaming of movies and $3.50 per DVD rental. Well, what do you know? Here we go. X is number of DVDs. Y is the monthly cost. And, this is always interesting when this happens. They explained all of it up here, and then they just gave you the equations for free. So these equations right here, they're just summarizing all this stuff. How do you like that? So they gave you these equations for free. They didn't have to, because this is just repeating all this. Which statement about the costs of the movie services is true? So once again, I think this is the only strategy available to us. Trying out each choice. All right. When Gloria rents 3 DVDs per month, either service will cost her $22.50 per month. So remember, number of DVDs is X. So when they say 3 DVDs, they might as well be saying X equals 3. And when they say $22.50 per month, they might as well be saying Y equals 22.5. So let's check it out. If we plug in 3 for X, both of them, and $22.50 for Y, will it fit in these equations? Will it make both equations true? Well, is this true? If you do 15 plus 2.5 times 3, will you get $22.50? And will you also get 22.5 if you do 12 plus 3.5 times 3? Maybe, maybe not. I also gave the work here for B, because instead of X equaling 3, what if X equaled 6? Would that make both equations equal to 27? Because since Y would be 27. Turns out that it was A. This here in maroon ends up being 22.5. Same with the math in green. So both of these equations worked out when you plugged in 3 for X and 22.5 for Y. Number 9, here's an inequality. Which is the graph? Well, I hope you almost immediately know that you must take this inequality and solve for X. First thing I'm going to do here in solving for X is subtracting 5X from both sides. Basically, I'm going to cancel out the X from the left side and have it over here on the right. So I have a positive X term over here. Next, what I'm going to do is subtract 4 from both sides. And I'm going to end up with this. Negative 10 is less than X, which is much better written the other way. You know, instead of saying negative 10 is less than X, it's better to read this as X is greater than negative 10. Just kind of read it backwards. And I hope you can take this, X is greater than negative 10. This symbol means an open circle. Okay, they're all open. Okay, well that helped. But which one says that X is greater than negative 10? That would be B. Greater than negative 10. Number 10, 3 more to go. A part for a machine must meet certain length requirements in centimeters, as shown in the inequality below. Ooh, and it's got absolute value. Which statement completely describes the length requirements for this machine part. Okay. What do you normally do? What have you hopefully been trained to do with absolute value inequalities? Well, I hope you at least sort of remember that you can split this up into two cases. The first case, 6.75 minus x is less than 0.25. And what's the other case? 6.75 minus x is greater than what? Negative 0.25. So in the second case, we've flipped the symbol and we've made this 0.25 negative 0.25. And now what you normally do is solve each one separately. Looks like I subtracted 6.75 from both sides. In both cases, subtract 6.75 from both sides. And then what do you do from here? Wouldn't you maybe divide both sides by negative 1? Dividing both sides by negative 1, notice the flip of the sign, because whenever you divide both sides of an inequality by a negative number, you flip the symbol. Them's the rules, right? And so you get this and this, which is basically just completely written out, I guess, in D? Yeah. Woo! Absolute value inequalities. Now, just, I don't know, a little little bit of elaboration, I guess, on number 10. I mean, number 10 is done, but let me expand a little bit, and I guess there's a little bit more I could say about this sort of thing. When you see absolute value statements like this, okay, you can read, and by the way, x just means the length of the part. Like x is the unknown length of the part, okay? So this might as well say the absolute value of 6.75 minus the length of the part is less than 0.25. Let me just give you a quick alternate translation. When you see the absolute value of a difference, you can think of it as like the distance between, you know what I mean? The distance or the difference between these. So you could overall translate this to the distance between the length of the part and 6.75 has to be less than 0.25. So like it can be 0.25 less than 6.75, or it could be 0.25 greater. You know, like the difference between, I don't know. I'll just end it right there, but so you see how it's like we can range between 6.5 and 7. Anyway, but I would focus on these, you know, all this splitting up into two case, you know, step-by-step work. That's how you should probably react to an absolute value inequality. Splitting it up into the two cases. Two more problems. Okay. All right, so how? So they give you a graph of a system of inequalities, and they want to know which system describes the graph. Well, the annoying thing about this problem is that all of these inequalities are not in what form? They're not in slope-intercept form. So what you are probably going to have to do, and now the good news is that all of these systems match except for the symbols, less than or greater than less than greater than or equal, So we can just take these basic 5x plus 8y, equals 40, and 4x plus 3y equals 24. And we can put them in slope-intercept form. I'm not going to go through all of the explanations about how to do that, but here we go. I'm not going to do that now, but when you put this in slope-intercept form, we get this. So on the graph, y equals negative, so this would be m, this would be b, and so it turns out that on the graph, this is the 4x plus 3y whatever 24. Okay? And it turns out that this guy, because that would be m and that would be b, so as far as the symbols, like which one is it here? The lines were solid, not dashed. What does that mean? The fact that the lines up here were solid and not dashed what does that mean? That now disqualifies A and C, because these symbols would mean dashed lines. So now you just need to talk about the shading. So looks like the shading is above this guy. Well, this guy really. So the shading needs to be above the 4x plus 3y thing, but at the same time below the 5x plus 8y guy. So that is looking like above that. It's looking like B. Because greater than or equal to, less than, shading below. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Number 12. All the books in a bookstore window display today will be mysteries and biographies. Good for the bookstore. The system of inequalities below describes the relationship between number of mysteries is X, number of biographies is Y, that could be in the display. So apparently we got number of mysteries plus number of biographies has to be less than or equal to 30 total. But also this, 2 times the number of mysteries has to be less than or equal to 3 times the, okay. Which description is a possible number of books of each type that could be in the display? So here we go. Which one of these is correct? Now, I hope you quickly realize that these are all possible solutions. Remember, because number of mysteries is X. So this is basically saying if you let X equal 6, if you let X equal 6 and Y equal 22, will that satisfy both of these inequalities? So that's one thing you could do. You could just check out each one of these choices one at a time. Or what you also could do is draw a quick little graph. Graph this system. Okay? And so when I graph both of these, this would be what? If you solve this for y, you'd have like y is less than or equal to negative x plus 30. That's this guy. And so the shading would be below. And if I solved this one for y, it would be y is greater than or equal to 2/3, like you divide both sides by 3. And you'd have 2/3 x is less than or equal to y, but if you read that backwards, it'd be y is greater than or equal to 2/3 x. So that's this guy, right? A slope of 2/3, or in other words, up 20 over 30. So that's why I have this dot right there, because that represents the slope of 2/3, or equivalently 20 over 30. But it would be greater than, so we shade above this line, but at the same time below this line, and they're both solid line. Yeah, okay, good. I didn't screw that up. They're both solid lines as they're supposed to. And so here's the overall shading. And another way to look at this is which one of these combinations lives in the shading. So again, this would be the same as 6, 22, because mysteries is x, biographies is y. So is 6, 22, 6, like 5, remember this goes 5, 10, 15. So 6, choice A is looking very good. How about 15, 8? 5, 10, 15, 8. Maybe not so good. 21, 14. 5, 10, 15, 20. 21, 14. No, not good. 24, 12. 5, 10, 15, 20. 20. Yeah, not looking good. Not looking good. So according to the graph, it looks like 6, 22 is in my shading. Henceforth, vis-a-vis, ergo, is a solution and would be a proper combination of mysteries and biographies. But let's go back to the trying out each answer. So, for example, if you did 24 plus 12, 24 for x, 12 for y, is that going to be less than or equal to 30? No. So it's not D and it's not C. Anyway, we know it's A. Here is confirmation that it is in fact A. Because if you do 6 plus 22, that is in fact less than or equal to 30. And if you do 2 times 6, it is in fact less than or equal to 3 times 22. And so it is A. And that does it for the Module 1 group of 12 questions released 2018.